Hello, everyone. I promise you this conversation will not be awkward at all. So, let me tell you a story. A story about a little girl who rode her pink potty all around the house when taking her daily poo. A daily routine that she never missed and she never took for granted. And even in a room filled with guests, she strolled with courage, and honestly, I can only imagine how uncomfortable she made these guests feel. But she didn't care. She, as people would say, she was living her best life. So this 3-year-old version of me just rode that potty all around the house. And she told people that, you know what, this is my toilet business, and I'm not ashamed of having perfect bowel movements. My name is Mariam Mhina. And when I finally outgrew my pink potty, I may or may not be using it, but let's not talk about that. So I finally outgrew my pink potty, and I had to turn to toilets as my main point of business. I had no choice. It was a bit awkward at first, but we got used to each other, and I got used to pooing in private, I think. I mean, I still love leaving the toilet door open, but that's a story for another day. Yeah. So yes, I got used to toilets, but what never sat well with me was the fact that I couldn't talk about my poo anymore. And I remember when I was 7 years old, I was traveling with my mom from one town to another back home in Tanzania, my beautiful Tanzania, and it was a 9-hour drive. I don't know for you, but as for me, in the period of 9 hours, I will need to use the toilet a couple times. I won't tell you how many times, just a couple times. And thankfully, I wasn't the only one. I recall hearing the man behind us calling the bus conductor and telling him, "Naomba kuchimba dawa." Now, this is a Swahili phrase that literally translates to, "May I go dig medicine?" At that moment, I was the most confused child. I mean, why does this man want to dig medicine in the middle of the bushes? What witchcraft is this? So I was curious, right? So I decided to ask my mother, "Mama, what does kuchimba dawa mean?" And my mother gave me that look an African mother will give you when she just wants you to shut up. But 7-year-old me was not having it. I wanted my answer. So my mother leaned towards me and whispered in my ear that the man was pressed and he needed to relieve himself. I was very amused, laughed out loud and asked, "Why doesn't he just say that he needs to poo?" Mind you, I didn't whisper this back to her. I was so loud that everyone in my proximity heard me, and they all just stared at me. I swear I could hear their faces screaming at me. So as you would imagine, I just shrank into my seat, and I never said another word the whole way through. I hated the fact that they looked at me with so much judgment, the way they wondered who is raising this despicable child. But, oh well, I am who I am, right? So, as days went on, I realized that my poo was not the only taboo that I would have to deal with. Now, you may be wondering, why is something as natural as poo even a taboo in the first place? Why? Because research done by Mr. Munyarati Mawere, who's a culture and heritage professor, mentions that taboos were created to keep our society in check, to make sure that we're not crossing certain boundaries, making people feel disrespected or uncomfortable. Now, I am all for respect and comfort, but we need to understand that not having certain conversations will stop us from solving any critical issues that come with it. When I was in high school, one of my very closest friends had major issues with her bowel movements, and she would stay up to 30 days without pooing. Now, those of us who take our morning, and sometimes our evening poo too, don't raise your hand, would know that how uncomfortable it would feel to just have everything stuck inside. And my friend had this going on for months. So after pain and discomfort, she finally decided to speak up. And her parents took her to the hospital only to realize that she had IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. Now, when IBS is left untreated, it can lead to both physical complications and anxiety that could potentially lead to depression. My own friend found it difficult to even speak to me about it because she was ashamed of how I would think of her afterwards. And up to this day, she still cannot talk to her father and her close family members about it because she's scared of feeling secluded and judged. Do you feel the weight in something as light as our waist? The poo that we've made a taboo and refuse to speak about? Now, at this point, you're probably wondering if all I'm going to be talking about is absolute shit. Well, yes, Because today, poo is a metaphor that matters and it needs to sink in. It represents the crucial conversations that we denounce and choose to avoid. Conversations that, if we had, would be the first step into solving many critical issues. A brave act by an American actress, Alice Milano, of simply posting a tweet started a movement that was fueled a movement that was started by Tarana Burke, a civil rights activist. Now, the Me2 movement helped so many sexually harassed victims to finally be able to speak up about their trauma. And not only that, according to Snell and Wilmer Business Law Firm, it helped change the non-disclosure agreement that could hide any sexual harassment claims. Can you feel the transformational power in simply starting conversations? Now, conversations about our toilet business are closer to home than you may think. They can actually help us build our relationships and enhance our character. I know you're probably wondering, what in the world is this young lady saying? How is my poo going to build my relationships and enhance my character when I can't even fart in front of my loved one? That's okay. I was fortunate enough to be raised by two different families. One of them is very open to saying something like, I really need to poo right now. And the other will not even dare let out a fart. This may seem silly, but I realize that it is more than that. I am very close to the family that is open about their toilet business. And this is because of just one of the small things we have done to just get rid of these old taboos that are holding us back. So I'm going to tell you a story. This one has my uncle in it. I don't know how he's going to feel about me exposing him, but he'll forgive me later. So we'll all be in the sitting room, the whole family, and it's chilled, it's calm. We're watching a movie, Game of Thrones maybe, well, that's a series, but yeah, we'll be watching something. And someone in the room, me of course, will feel a fart coming. Now, in normal circumstances, one would try to hold that fart in, but we, in my family, we are extraordinary. So Mariam would dash towards her uncle and give him the surprise fart of his life. Nasty, weird, I know what you're thinking, but you should hear and you should feel the loud laughter that fills the room after every surprise fart. The dopamine that builds up in our body, a neurotransmitter that makes us feel happy and excited. Who would not want to be around people that give you so much joy? So in my family, we bond by eliminating this taboo that comes with so much baggage. Have you? So my confidence in being open about my toilet business has diffused into every aspect of my life. And it is what has allowed me to stand up here today and give you this talk. It has allowed me to have the guts to have uncomfortable conversations that matter. Conversations that people would say are not in our norms or not in our culture. Menstruation, for example, is not a subject like any other back home in Tanzania, and it is yet something else that is considered a taboo. Somehow, everything that is natural to our bodies is considered a taboo. I still do not understand why we keep holding on to these things. So there was a period in my life when my hormones were going crazy. This is normal, by the way. So my hormones were going crazy, and my period was there for longer than it should be. I had to tell my father about it, but I couldn't. I remember stammering so much over the phone that my mother had to take over the conversation. Now, I had been taught to be ashamed of my blood and to keep it to myself. And I am not the only one, because according to the Belgian project that focuses on global news and world poverty, mentions that only 12% of girls in Africa can have conversations about their menstruation with their mothers. So what about the rest of us? The rest of the 88%? This conversation is more or less forbidden between a father and her daughter. How dare you speak about such a thing? But you know what? It's something that has to stop. And if we do not talk about it, how are we going to be proactive in helping the millions of girls in our own continent that are constantly missing classes just because they do not have access to sanitary pads? How are we going to do that? We need to have these indispensable conversations. We need to stop blocking these conversations that actually matter. So yes, taboos were created to keep our society in check. But these taboos were made tens of years ago, and we have grown exponentially since then. Am I right? We have grown exponentially since then. And the world as it is now is not the same as it was 50 years ago. So we live in an era where the society pushes you to be more open-minded, to be more accepting. But sadly, we're still stuck with these old taboos. Poo, menstruation, flatulence, and even things like sex are things we should not consider a taboo anymore. Why do we consider them a taboo, but yet we're more open and we tolerate things like body shaming, we tolerate slut shaming, we tolerate constant negative judgment about each other? Why do we tolerate such adversity and refuse to let go of these taboos that are holding us back? So here's what we should do. We should create our own new taboos that are, first of all, relevant. We should stop focusing so much on learning how to appropriately excuse ourselves to go to the bathroom in a meeting, and we should focus more on how we make comments about someone's body or someone's sexuality. So let's make it a taboo to body shame. Yeah? Let's make it a taboo to negatively judge each other. Let us make it a taboo to not have access to sanitary pads so that millions of girls can stop missing classes. Let us make it a taboo to avoid uncomfortable conversations that actually matter. If we're going to keep our society in check, we need to create our own taboos, taboos that will eliminate judgment and uplift our communities. So now I ask you, taboos, what are your views? Thank you.